potential, and that is the power of encouragement. The power of encouragement. There's so much life-giving power in one single word of encouragement. One sincere affirmation. You could literally change a person's life, but you don't even believe that, or else you would be more intentional about encouraging. And I know this is true because it changed my life. I've experienced it. 20 seconds of encouragement changed the trajectory of my life, and I'll get to that story in a second. I came across a story about two men. One is a professional baseball player, and the other is a lifelong inmate. And their lives intersected in a gymnasium at the prison. And the one guy, he had a father. The baseball player had a dad that knew how to speak life into his kid. The two enjoyed baseball, and so they spent a ridiculous amount of time together around baseball, whether watching it, playing it. And the son, he actually was really good. And so he ended up in the minors as a young man, and he was batting consistently over 300. And the pros were impressed by him, so they brought him up to the pros. But he got up to the pros and his batting went well under 100 because he was so intimidated by the men that he had idolized most of his life. And they felt like giants, and he felt like a grasshopper being on the same field with them. And so his game bombed, and they put him back down in the minors. And then his game would just go through the ceiling, and they put him back up in the majors. 6 times this transition happened. And eventually he said to his dad, "I can't do this anymore. I'm going to quit." And his dad said, "You can't quit." He said, "If they let you go, they let you go, but you can't quit." And so dad and his son, they figured out how the boy could get out of his head. He went back up into the majors and he played professional baseball for 8 years. And after 8 years, he retired. He had a lot of money, but he decided, I want to do something meaningful. So he decided, I want to be the voice of encouragement to others that my dad is to me. And that's why he was in a gymnasium in a prison. And at the end of his talk, he said this. He said, with all the success I have enjoyed, the thing that is most gratifying is that I did not disappoint my dad. And the inmates gave him a round of applause, and they got up and they left the gymnasium. And the last guy to get up was sitting at the very back. He was an older man by this time. He shuffled to the front to shake hands with the baseball player. He had tears running down his face. And he says to the baseball player, I know that what you said today is true. I know this because ever since I was a little boy, my father told me I was a piece of trash. He told me I would never amount to anything. He told me I was a loser and I would probably be in prison before I was 25 years old. And he said, and sir, I didn't disappoint my father either. Can you see how both of these men, their voices were so powerful, and that power worked as it was designed to work. And it's just that one misused his power and one used his power. You see, belief drives behavior. What you believe, you will do. And words can shape your future. And your words can shape someone else's future. I think that the call to encouragement is so important, especially because human beings are wired with a negativity bias. You've noticed how you do 9 things right and you do one thing wrong, and what is it that you fixate on? The one thing that you did wrong. And when you fixate or you ruminate or you focus, it creates a magnifying kind of a power. Because whatever has the power to hold your focus will dominate your entire life. And that's exactly what happened in these two men's lives. One focused on what his father said, and his father said, you can do anything. And the other focused on what his father said, and his father said, you can't do anything. We all go through seasons. We all fail, okay? All of us get defeated. All of us lose sometimes. But you don't have to define yourself by that season of your life. If you go through life looking for how you do not belong, that's exactly what you'll see. Because we always see what we're looking for. If you go through life thinking that you're not enough, that's exactly what you'll find, because we always see what we are looking for. And if you walk through life telling yourself you're a failure, that's what you will see. I've discovered this: when you've failed a lot, and I have failed a lot, self-help doesn't really work that well. Instead, what we need so often is the powerful sound of another voice. Someone who sees beauty in us that we cannot see. Someone who sees worth that we cannot feel. Someone who sees potential that we are blind to. And they speak into your life, and their words, you can hold on to them. There's an ancient proverb that says, encourage one another daily while it's called today. You see, people desperately, everybody desperately needs courage, especially when you don't believe in yourself, especially when you're floundering, especially when you've failed. By the time I was 19, I had failed so much in school. And I was pretty sure I was the dumbest kid in my junior high, and knew for sure I was the dumbest kid in my high school. And so I did what the dumbest kid does. I cheated all the way through junior high. I cheated all the way through, because I already decided that it doesn't really matter anyway. And you fail over and over and over again. And something goes on inside of you. A narrative starts forming. And it says, and I knew this, I believed this by the time I was like 17, 18 years old. I was absolutely convinced that I did not have the intelligence, I didn't have the constitution, I did not have the capacity to live out a single dream that was alive in my heart. And so it felt hopeless. There was one thing, the only thing I could do well, and I had a good singing voice. So I was the quintessential nerd. I'm 15 years old, and it's the only thing that's working. And so I went and found a voice coach. I always had a part-time job, so I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anybody because I was embarrassed. And for 5 years, I sang opera. I know does it get nerdier than that? It doesn't get nerdier than that. I sang opera. And but in that nerdy world of opera, I belonged. I had something that others appreciated. And that felt good. And so it didn't matter how much money it cost me. I'd work extra just so I could belong. And then something really cool happened. When I was about 16, I have an uncle, my favorite uncle. He's only about 10 years older than I am. He has a 3-octave voice, and for those of you who are into music, that's an extraordinary voice. And he was putting together, I grew up in the church, and he was putting together a gospel group. We called them quartets, but that's so nerdy. That's right up there with opera, right? But we did a quartet. And he wanted me to come and sing tenor we're all young, we're all 17, 18 years old, except for my uncle. And so we sang for about 6 years together. And mostly in churches, but every now and then we get an invitation to sing at a conference. And we got this invitation to sing at a substantial conference in Calgary. And we wanted to break out this new song. And so we practiced for a couple nights in a row. And after 2 nights of practicing, we canned a song because I was supposed to sing tenor, but I kept dropping down into the lead. Then they made me the lead and I kept dropping. And I was failing again. You see, when you're good at one thing, you compartmentalize all the other shit in your life. All the other pain in your life, all the other failure. You put it in a room and you close the door. And after failing for 2 nights in a row, and we finally decided we will not use this song. And everybody was clearly disappointed, and I knew it was my fault. And that night, it's like the door flung open and all the shame and all the failure and all the self-criticism, it came flooding out, and I was just so completely overwhelmed. We packed up equipment, and I wanted to get to my truck as fast as I could, and I just could barely breathe. And my uncle was parked beside me, and so in the parking lot, he walks up beside me. And he says, I was thinking about you today, Ed. All day, I don't know why you were on my mind at work. He said, and I was thinking about how I think you're going to influence and inspire a lot of young people in your life. Like I think thousands. He said, anyway, I'm proud of you, Ed. Have a good night. He gets in his truck. And I get in my truck and I hold my breath until he drives away. And then I start to sob. Because I felt something I hadn't felt in such a long time. I felt hope. He breathed hope into me that maybe I'm not, because I respected him so much. And if he saw a future for me, just maybe there was really a future for me. And it's interesting, there's a great verse in the Bible that says, pleasant words are like honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. And his words were like honeycomb. They healed something inside of me. See, 20 seconds, it cost him 20 seconds, that's nothing. Those words cost him nothing, but they were everything to me. And I held on to those words. I fed on them. I went back to them again and again because I kept failing in everything else in my life. And then I remembered what he said to me. And I held on to his faith in me until I had faith in me myself. You have no idea how powerful a single word of encouragement is, especially from a father to a son or a daughter. I'm going to tell you 2 more stories and then I'm done. Brennan Manning is a professor at Ohio State University. He's also a Catholic priest. And he was saying, he wrote a book, and in the book, he wrote many books, but he writes about a student that he had at the University of Ohio. His name was Larry. And Brennan Manning said that by society's standards, Larry was deficient. He was a little strange. He was a lot ugly. He was short. He was extremely obese. He had acne. He had a lisp. He had the worst hair on the planet and went every direction all at the same time. He said in all of his years of teaching at the university, he had never, ever met a human being with such low self-esteem. And as they got to know each other, Larry confessed during college that at the first morning he woke up, he spit in the mirror when he saw his image, his reflection. And he spit in the mirror every morning until he couldn't see himself in the mirror. But the real story, the key to Larry's story was a gift that he got at Christmas one day. You see, Larry's dad was a lace curtain Irishman. I'm told that there are lace curtain Irishmen and there are shanty Irishmen. And a lace curtain Irishman will not come to dinner even in the hottest days of the summer unless he's wearing a full suit with a starched collar, white shirt, a swollen tie. They speak in low tones, wouldn't let his sideburns grow beyond the tops of his ears. He was controlled. He was disciplined. And he's sitting there at the table, and Larry comes home from university for Christmas. And he shows up at the table smelling and looking like a billy goat. And the two of them start, and they begin with their typical arguments, and then apologies, followed by more debate, and so begins another Christmas at the Milani household. Several nights later, Larry says to his father that I got to go back early. And the dad says, well, why don't you ride the bus with me to the textile factory? That's where his father worked. And he said, and then you can take a second bus to the airport. And the two sat on the bus side by side, and they didn't speak to each other. But they were comfortable with silence. They got off the bus at the textile factory, and there were 6 or 7 guys across the street from the bus stop having a cigarette, talking. And when Larry and his father got off the bus, the guys saw Larry, and they started to laugh. And then they started to make degrading remarks. And one guy says, if that pig was my son, I'd bury him in the basement. If my son looked like that, I'd kick him out of the house so fast. And the onslaught went on and on and on. And then Larry's dad did something he had never done before in his life. Right there out in the public, right there out on the street. He put his arms around his son, and he hugged his face, and he kissed him on the lips. And he said, Larry, if your mother and I lived to be 200 years old, that wouldn't be enough time to thank God for the gift he gave us in you. He said, son, I am so proud of you. And Brennan Manning said that it would be difficult. He said, no, it would be impossible to describe for you the change, the transformation that took place in Larry in that second semester. Larry, he's still a hippie, but he got cleaned up. He became the president of a fraternity. Miracle of miracles. He got a girlfriend. And Larry became the first student at the University of Ohio to graduate with a 4.2 GPA. The first student in history to graduate with such a high GPA. And over the course of time, Larry became friends with Brennan Manning. And Brennan Manning had a tremendous influence on his life. And Larry and his wife got married, and they went to South America, and they worked as missionaries, looking after people who needed their help, looking after people who had a hard time looking after it themselves. And you want to know why? Because on a day at Christmas so long ago, standing at a bus stop, a lace-curtain Irishman healed his son. And he gave his son words that he could hold on to. Words that got inside of him and transformed him. You see, words of affirmation, they have the power to set people free to see themselves as love sees them, to see themselves as God sees them, and they hold on to them. I'll tell you one more story and then I'm done. In the 80s and 90s, I've worked with young people my whole adult life. And I had the privilege of traveling quite a bit overseas. And I spent about 3 or 4 months a year in Europe, in Germany, in Switzerland, and France. And I had bases. When I say bases, I had an apartment in Germany that I could work out of. And then I had friends, really good friends in Lausanne, Switzerland, who had a room for me whenever I needed one. And this particular trip, I had 3 weeks, and I was working in Switzerland the whole time. And I would use the train system all the time. And so I was in and out of the train station. At the front of the train station in Lausanne, Switzerland, it's just an enormous concrete courtyard. And I remember it was a sunny day, and I got there early, so I just sat on a bench, and I watched these street kids skateboard. And there's one kid that really caught my attention. It was a girl. And again, this is the late 80s, early 90s. And punk was kind of the rage. And this gal, she stuck out because she had shaved half of her head. And she tattooed her neck and part of her face. And then she pierced anything that could be pierced up there. And she's just unmistakably punk. And I just was staring at her, and then she skated she rode her board right past me. And I just yelled out, I said, "Hey, you're really good at that thing." She stopped and kicked up her board and came over. And she started speaking to me in English. I said, "Your English is amazing. You don't have an accent or anything." She said, "Yeah, I'm going to New York." I said, "Well, what are you going to do in New York?" She said, "I'm going to make it there." And I'm thinking, well, thank you, Frank Sinatra, and so we chatted for a little bit, and I found her fascinating, but she stank. And then every time in that 3 weeks, every time I came back to the train station, through the train station out to the courtyard, she was waiting there for me. And the first time she said, "You hungry?" Which actually meant she was hungry. And so there's a McDonald's right across the street. And so I said, "Let's go get something to eat." We went to McDonald's about 4 or 5 times in those 3 weeks because apparently I was hungry a lot. And I said to her one day, I'm just absolutely astounded at your English. And I learned there that she speaking English was her passion. And she just basically learned it from the radio and from the television. And I said to her, "I think your love for English, and you certainly have a gift for it." I said, "What if it is pointing you to your future? Would you go if you knew that you could do something with that gift?" And she said, "Yeah, I guess." And I said, "Well, listen, I'm speaking at this event tonight. Would you be my interpreter?" I said, "This is your first chance." All the churches in Lausanne had brought their high school kids together, and I was just to do an evening with them. And I did have an interpreter, but I don't know, I just decided off the top of my head. I said, "Would you be my interpreter?" And she said, "How much?" I thought, wow, they paid me 300 Swiss francs to do that talk. And I said, "How about 300 Swiss francs?" She goes, "Done." And so I said, "I'll pick you up at 6:30. So then I go get cleaned up, and the people I stay with, they're driving me to the event, and we're talking, and they mention a translator. And I said, oh, I got my own translator. We got to go pick her up. And so we go to the train station, and when he sees who it is, like he just bug-eyed at her. Like he goes, "No, no, 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 no." And I said, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." And so then I said to her name is Noemi. I said, "Noemi, you just stay with me, okay?" And what you do at those events usually is all the leaders, the youth group leaders, will gather in the green room beforehand and just pray together. And then we go out and we do our evening. And so she obviously had never been to church because there are some people praying with their hands up, a lot of people bowing, some people kneeling. And she sees all of this and it freaks her out. And she thinks she's whispering, but she's not whispering. She goes, "What the F is this? Is this a cult?" I said, No, 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 no. They're just praying. They're just shut up. And so we get out there and we do the evening. I pay her 300 Swiss francs, drop her off at the train station. And then I asked my friend, I said, "How did she do?" Because I can't understand French. And he said, "Well, she did really well." He said, "I don't think we've had an event with so many F-bombs, but she for her first time, she did really, really good." And my friend, the really beauty of this story is that my friend and his wife, they fell in love with her. And she was a street person. And they brought her into their home. They gave her my room, and she stayed with them for several years. And that was a transforming experience for her. But then she kind of disappeared. 10 years ago, so this 20 years must have gone by. And then I get a text from my friend from Lausanne, Switzerland. He said, I'm in Geneva. I'm walking by the convention center. There's a symposium on the plight of homeless youth. And he takes a picture of the poster. He said, look who the keynote speaker is. It was Noemi. One word of encouragement can change the trajectory. You can change the trajectory of a person's life. There is so much power in a word of encouragement spoken in season, spoken with perfect timing. So my final thought to you is this. If you will be intentional about looking for beauty in people, everybody, for looking for courage, for looking for strength, if you will look for it, you will find it, because you always see what we're looking for. And you begin to speak to it. You speak to what you see. I promise you, you will live the rest of your life leaving people much, much better than you found them. Thanks.